Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. So, for today's episode, we're actually kicking off our climb from episode 221, and this time we're going to end off at episode 230. Now, in this section of the tower, there are a ton of things that are about to go down. Firstly, we have Lopobia Elaine being taken up by Jin Sang Ha. Second, we have the entrance to the Floor of Death. Now, the Floor of Death is a crazy saga, and as I said, we have the entrance, we don't have the full Floor of Death because there's a lot to go. Now, regardless of where it is, remember they aren't yet exactly one floor away from the Floor of Death. They still have several floors to cover before they're on the Floor of Death, so there's a lot of hunting and fighting that's going to go down before they can get there. So let's start off at 221. Okay, so Lopobia Elaine steps out from the from the exhibition studio in the gallery, and we see that Jin Sang Ha looks at it, and we see that she starts taking off her heels, and then she starts moving around with arrows and not arrows, needles, and we see that she has some of the greatest control from a regular. We also see that she's using her real inventory and a sword at the same time. And we see that Yuri also sent someone in at the same time to bid on her. And then we see that Enda Rossi had a little bit of a problem when she saw the beautiful face of Elaine. The rest of her teammates looked at her and they saw that she was gorgeous, and she felt a bit abandoned by that day and a bit jealous in that manner. And we see Elaine is going through all of the trauma of her past, and we see that she's thinking that now her family can no longer hold on to her as a support. And we see that she's moving forward and she's saying goodbye to that part of herself. She'll move on to the next part of her life. And we see that the Lopobia family decides they wanted to stay here, and that they don't want to get into a bidding war to keep this girl. And then we see Jin Sang Ha decides they'll just go on the count of three and they'll decide who gets her. And we see that it's a quick and fast draw, and they all give out their bids. We see the first is Lopobia with 60 million points. We then see the Ha family with 2 billion points. And then we see Jin Sang Ha with 10 billion points. Now, you can understand that this is supposedly some crazy figures. That's army worth building. We then see that Jin Sang Ha explains that the girl was saved because of somebody who he considers to be his god, and that's just the way that it is. And then after that, there we see that Yuri is on the on her pocket, talking to the ranker from her family, and basically she gets the hint that she was outbidded by somebody else for 10 billion points. And we see Yuri is totally shocked and she has no idea what in the world happened on the station. And we see that she intended to buy Balm's name back and take him as her personal individual after that day. And then we see that Kun Mashni decides to contact Yuri, and basically she threatens Yuri that if she doesn't take part in the bet, she'll tell everybody where she is and she'll have to get off the train. And we see that the whole situation is explained to her. They're going to have a bet over their 13-month weapons. The green April for her yellow May. So those are the two weapons on this whole crazy bet. And then we see that Karaka decides to get off the train at the end of this episode. So that is where 121 ends. And let's get into 122. Now, one thing to note, these episodes are a lot larger than some of the other parts of the Tower's story, especially the latest chapters. If you're comparing the size of a chapter and the amount of information, generally this section of chapter 2 has a ton more for you to go through. The introduction of Hockney, the introduction of the Floor of Death, the first little expedition, the training they go through, everything got so much more in it. I'd say it's worth 10 episodes on its own for one or two of these episodes that are in the section. So please bear with me, as these are going to be quite heavy episodes from this point outwards. So we see that Marshni and Yuri have their conversation here in the start of episode 2. So they said that they'll agree on the details of it, and the whole thing will be Yellow May versus Green April. That's the two weapons, and if she truly wants to make changes in the tower, she'll have a chance to earn the Yellow May from Marshni. And we see that she feels that something is up and she has no idea what in the world is going on. All of a sudden, we see Karaka steps out of the train, and we see that he decides to attack Yuri Ha. And we see that Karaka uses the excuse that he's here for revenge because Yuri killed one of his servants, even though Karaka is actually in very big trouble. He actually needs to hide from Jinsung at the moment because if Jinsung finds out that he tried to kill Bam, he's dead. That's the reality behind this here. And the two get into their fight. At this point, we see the regulars are all exhausted from their whole name hunt. And we see that Lowry is his normal extra cranky self about not having had enough sleep. And we see that the train leaves that night. So everybody's going to get ready and then they're going to board. And we see that they talk about the fact that Alpine is now going to take over the station and she's going to try and resolve some of this no-name story and try to fix the problems, because instantly turning around a system doesn't fix the problems. That's what is being hinted at. Because you can't just change things around, because then you have hate and resentment and you have unnecessary problems that show up in the course of it. And then we see that Rak is still injured from his fight with Ares and Usha. And then all of a sudden we see Bam is looking out of the window and everybody's wondering what's going on. And we see Bam gives the whole thing, we're not gods, you know. And actually, I think that's Quinn talking to Bam. I'm not 100% sure on it. And then we continue to move on. And we see that for a brief moment, Bam actually wished that he could really be. And after a few seconds, we see that Enderosi comes charging towards Bam like crazy. And she basically says, are you really going to the Floor of Death? And we see that Enderosi wants to join Bam's team and head to the Floor of Death because there's someone on the Floor of Death who she really wants to meet badly. And we see that Bam is actually worried about having Enderosi and Yuri together because he suspects that Yuri is going to go crazy with Enderosi around and Enderosi is going to absolutely have a tough time with Yuri. And then we see that there's a fight going on in the background, which we already know was happening. That's Yuri and Karaka. And Karaka starts by blowing up the platform. And then we see Karaka says that Yuri should be more concerned with her own life. That is where episode 222 ends. We're on to episode 223. The fight continues, and this is now a ranker fight. And this isn't just a regular ranker fight, this is a high ranker fight. And their attacks are on a scale of destruction that's unbelievable. We see attacks are being hurled in both directions. And all of a sudden, Evan pulls out one of his weapons, and it's called the Frog Fisher, and he uses one of its desires, and he just absorbs Karaka's attack like nothing. Now, here's something to note. In the situation, Karaka is totally outmatched. He has Evan, who is a guide, who is way above his level in terms of ranking, and he has Yuri there. So he has a princess who is totally tough to defeat. He has a high level guide who can see the parts that are available for him, and he has them both high rankers, which means they both have unbelievable power at their disposal. We then see that Evan talks down to Karaka, and Karaka basically keeps going at it. And all of a sudden, we see Evan deploy a regeneration of the part that was destroyed by Karaka. And now Karaka is really worried because he got one free hit off, basically. Now he's going to have to face Yuri. We then see that all the regulars are now getting really worried. They're going to have to try and get out of there. We see that everybody is now heading out together, and they're going to try and figure out what they can do. And we see that anybody who can't walk won't be able to get onto the train, so anybody who needs time to recover isn't going to join them. Kun Ran's team was about to get onto the train. There was going to be Novik, Ran, Shia, Dan. It was going to be a crazy list of regulars on the train with them, and we also had Beta in that whole mix. So they were going to have this massive advantage to go and take on Rachel's team, and if they all got on board, Rachel was doomed. Her team would have been pinned down. Yuraha could have jumped as much as she wanted, and all of a sudden her jump would be up for the day. She would have gotten caught, she would have gotten captured by Team Novik, or even worse, if she came up against Bam, most probably would separate her from her bag, steal the bag from her, and that would be the end of it. She wouldn't have a weapon anymore. So we see they all decide they're going to head towards the train, and only those who can do it safely will go with. So we see Iwa and the swordsman, along with Rak, also trying to get on, and the three of them are injured. And then we see Yuri go at it, and she starts fighting with Karaka this time, and she gives him a nuclear punch straight off the back. This time she can use Shinsu, so things are going to get extremely crazy. And then we see Karaka deploys his Black Twilight, his little spheres that are meant to absorb energy and be used against a person. And we see that Yuri gets this feeling that if she doesn't kill him right away, he's going to come back as a worse enemy later on down the line. And then we see that Kun says that something is really, really strange. The administrator should have stepped in to interfere with this fight, because it's rankers fighting too close to a regular area. And he's wondering what could be the reason for the administrator allowing this. And then we see that Evan is wondering what in the world are the regulars doing as they're getting ready to run to the train. And we see that basically Kun says, if you can't take care of yourself over here, you will die. Because the moment you fall behind, the moment you get left behind, this type of a fight will kill you instantly. One little mistake and it's all over. The little portion of the bridge that still hasn't been fixed is where Enderossi's Bong Bong is going to come in, and she's going to take people across in that way. We then see that the three members of the team, Rak, Iwa, and the swordsman, are told that they shouldn't even think of doing this here because it will be very dangerous for them. And we see that Iwa says she's going there regardless of whether she even has to risk her life. And that is where 223 ends. So let's get on to 224. We then continue with the regulars and their approach towards the train. Now, I am going to paraphrase a ton of this and skip a whole lot of content just because it doesn't really make that much of a situation. And we see that they have the greeting with Chibisu's team and they start running for it. At this point, Evan sees it and he decides to deploy a second weapon called the Adam's Glove, which is going to hide their image and it's also going to hide the sound that they're making from crossing the bridge. We then see that they start moving and finally they reach the point where Enderosi starts using the bong bong to get people across the gaps, and that is how they start moving. We then see Yuri versus Karaka, and we see that Karaka explains that his Dark World neutralizes all enemy attacks, even the attacks of high rankers are no exception. And then we see that he says that it has a second secret, and he all of a sudden releases all of Yuri's energy back at her. And he calls it the Reign of Darkness. All of a sudden, the attack is launched back. And he basically says she'd definitely take damage from that. And we see that Yuri said that actually made her jump. And then we see that Karaka makes a quick look at the path and he wonders if he saw someone up there. And then all of a sudden, we see that Yuri is getting ready to fire at him. So she pulls out a really powerful ignition weapon called Cronus. Now, this is an ancient weapon from the tower. It's a needle, and she basically says that this is one of the crazy needles, and she can ignite it on any floor just once, and that's the reason why she brought it here. And she didn't expect to fight a monster like this, and this is just a distraction so that the regulars can cross the bridge. So she finally gets ready to fire it, and basically she goes with a single ignition of this weapon to destroy Karaka. And Karaka notices the regulars as the weapon ignites because it disrupts the Adam's Glove. Then we see that Karaka uses some crazy technique to escape the blast, and he basically sacrifices one of his arms in the process. At that point, we see that Karaka arrives on the bridge, and we see that he wants Jovial Grace, and that is where 224 ends. We'll head on to 225. Now, here's one of the crazy things. Right now, Karaka could kill Bam. But in a few short weeks, Karaka is absolutely at Bam's mercy. If he fights Bam once Bam takes on the training that he gets from the God of Guardians on the train, Karaka is in trouble. His Black World little technique that he uses is absolutely useless. Plus, Bam still has the souls and he has the thorn to ignite. If he ignited the thorn and used the soul's power, Karaka would be dead. Plus the fact that he breaks spells instantly with his attacks when he starts using Shinsu Black Hole Sphere. And Karaka uses a spell to keep himself immortal. So Karaka would be dead if he fought Bam when he jumps off on the floor of death. If he had been so cocky as to take one of the hits from Bam head on, saying that he's just a regular, it would have been bye-bye Karaka, no more immortality, dead. Right, so let's continue on with this. So we see that he basically screams that he needs Bam, and all of a sudden we see that that Bam decides he's going to go there and he'll try and help them out. Then we see that everybody is wondering what's going on. All of a sudden, Baum pulls out the wig, he puts it on, and we see that Harwin says that Baum won't die here. There's two reasons behind this here. If Karaka hurts Baum, he would be in trouble from two individuals from within Pug, two of whom would literally kill him and kill any other Slayer who tried to help him. Also, the elders would most probably die against either of the two who would help him. One is Mashaya Lazlak, Grace Mashaya Lazlak, and the other is Jinsang Ha. Both of them love Baum. And if he hurts Baum or kills Baum over here, he would have the strongest Slayer of Fag coming to slay him before he could ever get near his target. So he would be doomed. And secondly, he would have Jinsang Ha hunting him down, who taught him everything he knows. So he would be in even bigger trouble. At this point, we see Baum shows himself, and all of a sudden, we see Baum rushes over, and we see that they have their little conversation. And we see that Karaka tries to justify what he's doing. But you see, here are the big problems. Number one, Karaka doesn't have authority over Baum. Baum's authority is under Mashaya, and his authority is under Jinsang Ha, along with the elders who are supporting this here. Remember that Baum is literally one of the founders' children of Fug. So that's what makes it crazy. And we see that everything is now being flushed out. We then see that Jinsang Ha and Lopobia Elaine are carrying away on their ship. We see that Baum basically talks down to Karaka really bad and tells him to step away, otherwise he won't stand there and take it anymore. And we see Karaka gets really pissed because he's being threatened by a Slayer nominee, a mere candidate. And then we see that the threat really gets big because Yuri steps behind him and says, "You touch Baum and I will blow you up." Now, the reality of the situation is Karaka can't take on Yuri. Yuri is way too powerful for him. And beyond that, Baum is already a damn difficult person to fight. He can already reach ranker levels of power. And he could possibly hold high ranker power with the power that he has within him. And Karaka knows this. He also knows that he can't kill him because he has the thorn. So he'd have to be very careful with his assault. And everything is just like making Karaka's head spin. And then we see that Rak, Iwa, and Danwa decide that they are going to sacrifice themselves for this year. They're going to blast the path out from beneath them, falling away, and Endorossi just needs to take the Bong Bong, grab Baum, and continue on. All that is needed is for Baum to distract that idiot for one moment. And then we see Baum says, "Hey Karaka, about that ring you wearing, I've met someone who was wearing the exact same ring." At this point, we see Karaka gets totally distracted, and he asks what and where. And all of a sudden, we see the blast hits the platform. We see the Bong Bong grabs Baum, and they're out of reach of Karaka, and all of a sudden Yuri Ha launches a big grand attack. This attack vaporized Karaka, and we see it's Yuri Ha Shinsu control skill Murderous Energy, and it comes out as roses. All of a sudden we see that the barrier for the station is holding out against it, and we just see how crazy this attack is. It really looks like a sea of energy is launching out everywhere. And we see Bam is put in absolute pain as he thinks that he lost some of his most precious friends, that is Rak and Iwa. We see that Evan says that if the regulars got caught in that blast, they were dead. We then see Karaka using some type of skill, and it's Karaka Shinsu skill, World of Darkness, Infinite Past Lives, and he revives himself. And we see that Yuri was suppressing her power because she was afraid that those regulars would get caught in her attack, and that she's extraordinarily powerful even against him. And we see that Wagner is actually Karaka's brother. So that is the big secret that they're hiding away from us in the story. Now, at this point, that was Yuri's crazy assault that caused all this damage. And we ended off with Wagner about to pull off something crazy where he's about to fight Casino, and that is where 225 ends. Okay, let's start picking up the pace here because things are really important. We now get Wagner vs Casino using the antimatter bombs, and then we see that White was also pulled out of this whole situation by Prince and Miseng. Now, there's a lot going on here, and I'll explain it to you as we go through this here slowly and surely. We see that White is totally going berserk with being locked with the two of them. We see that they launched a plan to get White to help Miseng and Prince. And basically, White was actually considering helping them in exchange for getting his clone. We see that Yuraha said that this was a trap and that's what they're going to do. So they said they're here to be slaves of White. Basically, they'll serve him and they'll help him get his last clone if he helps them with this trap. And we see that Rachel is being uphanded by these kids if they do exactly what's being said. And we see that White decides to go along with their plan. And that is how things go. He grabs them and he starts laying his plan for what they were going to do. They wanted to get rid of Casino, and after doing it, they'll weaken Rachel a lot, and they could get a hold of whatever they wanted, and he could get a hold of his clone. We then see Wagner is attacking Casino with bombs non-stop. And we see that he fights him head on and even injects him with some kind of liquid directly into the devil. Then we see that it's a sleeping draft that's made specially to knock out the devil within him for several hours. And it only takes 5 minutes for it to take in effect. And all he's got to do is survive 5 minutes and he wins. We see Casino starts beating Wagner down, and Wagner says that he has a ball that can hold him. And we see that Casino keeps hitting him and keeps giving him this weird lecture that he's going to change the tower. Then we see Casino keeps beating on Wagner, breaking his bones and his fingers, and he keeps going at it non-stop all the way to the point where he breaks the containment that was made for him. And then we see Arkraptor jumps in and he shoots Casino. He knocks Casino down and then he captures him in the ball, which was actually meant for his containment. The one that he had was a decoy. And we see that Arkraptor basically tells Traveler not to do anything, otherwise he'll die. And we see he captures Casino, and Casino goes into his ball. And then we see that he goes to pick up Wagner, and he carries Wagner off with him. We see that Wagner basically starts joking and talking with Arkraptor, and he says that he's actually an extremely remarkable person, although he can't tell Arkraptor why. And then we see that that is where episode 126 ends. This is one of the shorter ones. We'll get on to 127. And on 127, we see we see that Wagner is left on the side after being beaten very badly, and he's about to open the room to let White and the other two out of their little containment. At this point, we see Rachel shows up and Uraha shows up, and they basically take Wagner as a hostage because he can't move. And they basically threaten to kill him unless Arc Raptor gives the code for the door. At this point, they get the code for the door and they give it to White. At this point, he says that he's going to give Missing and Prince a chance. They get to choose who dies first between the two of them, and Prince sacrifices himself here. So this is some of the most sad parts of the tower, and it's one of the most heart-wrenching and cruel incidents that we get to see the death of two characters in rapid succession. And then all of a sudden, we see that Rachel decides to give the ultimatum. She's going to kill one of the two of them and take the other one as a hostage. And finally, Arc Raptor decides to say that they should spare Wagner because he'll fight them if they kill him. And at that point, we see Rachel kills Arc Raptor, and they end up taking Wagner with them. And we see that Wagner cries that Arc Raptor shouldn't, and that's how Arc Raptor dies. So Rachel murdered Arc Raptor, and then we see that the totally wounded Wagner is dragged off by the two of them as their hostage. We then see a little story between Wagner and Arc Raptor, where Arc Raptor describes his daughter has the other earring from his wedding set that his wife had with her. And we see that a whole lot of things happen in the past, and then we see Wagner is mourning his friend, and then we see White emerge with Missing in her arms, and we see that he ate Prince, and that Prince chose to sacrifice himself to save Missing. And we see that Wagner is really, really miserable because he cost two of his companions their lives. We then see that he switches back to Bam and Kun, and that Bam is really, really depressed at the fact that he lost some companions. And then he finally leaves the episode with us seeing into Bam's eyes. Episode 228 starts off with Bam, and after a few scenes of Bam reliving what happened to him and how he is feeling miserable, he decides that he wants even greater power, and he needs power that can't lose to anything. We then see Wagnan's guilt as he looks through the memory of Arc Raptor and Prince as they were right in front of him, and he looks at them walking away as they fade out. He also sees Naya, and he says they can't return now, just like Naya. And that's how it is. Everybody who has ever looked up to him has always lost their lives, and that's what he is. He's the only one who ever survives, and he's a liar. After that day, we see that Wagner wakes up in the room with Missing next to him. And we see that he's hearing voices of people screaming, help me, Wagner. And we see that he's being tormented, and he starts screaming all of a sudden. And we see White basically looking down on him. And we see that White threatens to eat the two of them. And White is thinking that it's pathetic that he's crying over the loss of a few dead companions. And we see that Wagner is really cursing himself for what happened. And then we see that Casanova is angry at White because he didn't tell him about the plan that was set to catch him. And we see that White says that he should stop complaining because he was beaten by the pathetic Yellowhead, and that's basically the way that it is, and that is a fake ignition weapon. And he says that the reason why he's a fake is because he's using his head. A proper weapon has no human emotion, and that's what makes it better, and that's why you can control it to do whatever is needed. And we see that White explains that if a weapon has emotion, it's just a cumbersome tool. It's not something that you can truly use. It weighs you down and brings you back. And we see that White basically says that Pug won't help him along his path. He's not going to get what he wants out of this. Then we see Yura and Rachel are having this weird conversation about entering the floor of death and that they need to sacrifice the soul to enter. And we see that Rachel is trying to get the best D rank scout to get on the train. That is Hockney. And we see that they have something to actually hold him onto the train, a piece of a photo that he's been hunting for all across the tower. It's sitting in Rachel's lighthouse. We then see that Rachel is actually trembling with the fact that she killed somebody with her own hands, and she can feel the blood on it, and that she's thinking that she just has to get used to the fact that she's going to have to kill people. And we see that she sees the ring of Jahad that Wagner had, and she's wondering why he had that item. We then go to to Bam. And he is at the God of Guardians, and he asks the God of Guardians to teach him to become a god because he wants that much of power. That is where 228 ends, and we're off to episode 229. So we see that the God of Guardians starts asking Bam why does he want this and what's the whole reason behind this craziness. And we see that Bam just leaves when the God of Guardians says he can't help him, and he says that that's very cold. And we see that Bam says that he lost companions because there was a powerful enemy and his friends got killed because he couldn't defend them. And he's explaining that his lack of power has cost his companions. And we see the God of Guardians says that he's very greedy and he's already much stronger than other regulars. But the enemies that he's facing, he explains, are way stronger than him. And we see that the God of Guardian explains that great power doesn't help you. He explains what happened to Jahad in the past, and he says that even with the great power that he acquired, he never managed to do what he wanted. In fact, he knows one thing for sure is that tremendous power doesn't make everything right. Everybody isn't happy. And we see that the God of Guardians explains that the more powerful you are, the more responsibility on you. You know, great power, great responsibility. And we see that Bam is instructed to complete the next test, and when he returns to the God of Guardians, he'll teach him to become even stronger than he already is. We then see Enderossi jumps in and she starts lecturing Bam, and we see that Yuri is really pestering Enderossi non-stop. And we see that Kun explains that Rak, Iwa, and the swordsman Danwa are almost probably safe and they've survived somehow. He knows they wouldn't die that easily. And basically, we see that that is the weird thing that's being said. We then see Enderossi comes back and she says, don't be frustrated about being separated from your friends for just a minute. You've been reunited with some of them who you haven't been with for a while. And we see that that's the way that things go. And she starts running from Yuri once more. At this point, we see the advancement test for the next floor with the entire team. White's clone is there, Barrow, Kun, Rak, Boro, the whole lot of them are there, and they fought through this entire situation, and they decide that they might need another scout for the entire team, and the fact that Enderossi isn't helping them at all. We see that Kun explains that Beta might be able to come out of the lighthouse when they reach the floor of death, so they might have another fisherman in that situation. And we see that Wari Yun says that they shouldn't be worrying about Wagnan because Wagnan started walking his own path, and the next they meet him, they'll find out what has been going on. Then we see that Bam heads off to go for his training with the God of Guardians. Evan decides to train Kun with the lighthouse to do some crazy stuff. And then we see that the training starts with Bam and the God of Guardians. And we see that there was one distinct difference between Bam and Jahad. Now, the Jahad that the God of Guardians met is this Jahad. And the difference is that Bam wants to stand equal to others. Jahad wanted to stand on top of others. And it's a very small distinction, but it is something very important. And we see that the training begins with the God of Guardian shrinking down himself, and he decides to teach him Shinsu control that is meant for irregulars and not for regulars. We then see that they're on floor 40, and we get Wagnan and Miseng in a room, and they basically really cold all of a sudden. And we see Rachel is bringing them stuff to wrap themselves in. And we see that Rachel says that this is just to keep the little girl alive, and that she basically talks to Wagnan in a way, and then she explains to him something about his ring, and she says she wants to talk to him about something, and she calls him a prince of the red light district. And we see that Rachel offers Wagnan a chance to join her instead of keeping up with Bam, because Bam won't be able to be used to get the revenge they want on Jahad in the end. And we see that Rachel wants to get another piece of the thorn for herself so that she can use it to kill Jahad herself, because that's what she wants. And we see that she explains a little bit about the whole story with Enryu, and Enryu is a really important part coming up on the floor of death. When it comes to his part there, I will explain everything. And then we see Hockney is on the 40th floor, and he is about to board the train. So 229 ends, and we're on to 230. Now, I know that this is some of the best sections, and we see that Sachi and Boro are walking around with freezing weather inside the train. And we see that Sachi says that he knows an exceptional scout on this floor, but he has nothing to do with the train, and he's even tried to get him to come with him once before, but he'll never enter. We then see Bam and the God of Guardian are still fighting, and he basically says that he still doesn't know what he has to do, and that and we see that the God of Guardians explains that regulars are only granted permission to control Shinsu. Bam has the ability to control Shinsu. He is a big difference between him and everybody else, and he needs to know how to control the authority that he has. And we see that he's being taught the Shinsu Black Hole Sphere, and then we see that at the bottom, the 40th floor has the big mushroom farm, and basically that's how things are. And we see that Sachi and Boro have this crazy talk, and he explains about the guy who he met long ago. And then all of a sudden we see Hockney walks up onto the train, and we see that people try to stop Hockney from leaving because he helps their regular settlement, and he actually makes it a much more peaceful place. And then we see Hockney instantly take down two of them like it's nothing. saying that he's a really powerful individual as it stands. We see Hockney speak to Sachi like he knows him, and he says that he's looking for a woman on the train, and he has to basically buy something off her. Basically, and it's not a woman; he's a ticketer on the train. And we see that he shows the picture of his drawing with the missing piece, and he asks Sachi if he's ever seen it. And we see that Sachi calls it, not Sachi, sorry, Hockney calls the piece of his drawing the red light. And we see that this is his whole point for being on the train, and that what's his objective. He found out from Emily that a piece of his painting was on the train, and that he could acquire it here. And he explains that the red light is his soul. Then we see Yura is basically confronted about the fact that he's there and whether she's going to go and trade with the scout immediately. And we see that Hockney is from the floor of death, and that's why they brought him here, because he can help them. And basically she says she has his soul. We then see Wagner going through all of the flows with Rachel, and then we see that Rachel lets him out, and she basically says that she'll allow him to work with her for a little bit, and after this year, basically the whole agreement is that Miseng will be let loose, and Cassano will return the part of the devil that he stole to Ilma. And we see that Wagner promises that he'll kill Rachel one day for the crime she had committed of killing our character. Then we see that Kun has been training with Evan, and he calls him a demonic little dwarf. And we see that he's been training for something called Anako. And we see that Evan tries to inquire as to why they're all following Baum, and he gets this weird message like Kun says that if Baum were to leave his life, it would be like the end of the world. That is what Baum feels like to Kun and to all those who want to follow him. And that is where episode 230 ends. Now, let's go over everything that's going on. This is the prelude to the Floor of Death. The Floor of Death is a crazy section all on its own. So all along this whole path, we have the prelude to the Floor of Death. We see Karaka showing off his power, and we see just how crazy powerful Yuri is against him. So Yuri versus Karaka is miles and miles apart in terms of power. We see that Karaka isn't even a match for a princess. We see that Evan is also stronger than Karaka as well in this whole situation, which says how high ranked those two are. We then get the next hint of information, and that is the fact that Karaka and Wagner are brothers. They're both princes of the Red Light District. That's why they have that Jahad ring. On top of that, we get this whole crazy idea that Rachel wants to replace Baum's destiny with herself, which is something that I have gone on about many times. We then are going to learn a lot about Enryu in the next coming chapters. May not be in the next 10, maybe in the next 40 episodes. So I hope that there is a way to go through, and I hope that we actually see Enryu in the story really soon. So catch you all in the next one, and have a good day. You see how crazy it is? It's long, right?